Hello again. This is the third part of the history of Iran. And last time I think I ended it saying that Iran was attacked by the Allies. And even though Reza Shah stayed neutral, but because of his friendly relationship with Germany, they basically got rid of him and he died in exile. Uh, basically, England and the US and Russia didn't care about neutrality of Iran, even though for all practical reasons there were no German soldiers in Iran. They attacked Iran, and as I discussed it, they bombed some brick factories, thinking that they are major factories of Iran. At any case, Reza Shah ordered the army not to resist, and they laid their arms. And after they got rid of Reza Shah, his son Mohammad Reza Shah came to power. Actually, he was basically appointed. He was powerless and you could say helpless. And they used the railroad track in Iran. They basically wore it out, sending equipment to Russia. Had it not been for Iran, Russia would have never been able to defeat the Germans. And what happened to the railroad industries and the railroad tracks was that years of, I guess, labor went to waste, and basically Iran had to rebuild and repair the tracks all the way from the, I guess, Persian Gulf, all the way to the Caspian Sea. At any case, they basically, if I may say so, raped Iran, and they called Iran the victory bridge. They came to Iran and they had the famous Tehran conference, and the Shah of Iran, the king of Iran, the new king, wasn't even invited. That's really something. And these are the three major powers that at the time they were complaining and fighting the Germans, and they were saying what Germany had done to the other countries, and here they are, they attack a country that had stayed neutral. At any case, when Mohammad Reza Shah was put to power, I guess after World War II, because there was the void of central power in the two provinces, the Eastern Azerbaijan and Western Azerbaijan. I think Russia tried to annex these two provinces. And the way they did it, basically they stayed there and they wouldn't go away, they wouldn't move. It took a long time to get rid of them by putting the League of Nations. We didn't have the United Nations, but the League of Nations was the predecessor to the United Nations, and they tried to put the pressure on Russia, on the old Soviet Union, and eventually they left. Because there was a sort of an absence of the central power, Iranian government didn't have any really power in those two states, those two provinces at the time. There was a new party, which basically more like communist party, that they had a lot of followers, not only in Tabriz and in Azerbaijan, but in many different states in Iran. They had followers and members, because there was a relative freedom to join these parties, different parties, and also to publish newspapers, the books that were banned during the Reza Shah's time. And anyway, so there was some freedom, brief period of freedom, that they started publishing these banned books. At any case, after Soviet Union, the troops left Azerbaijan, and the Shah of Iran, I think, took the full control of those two areas. They started arresting these officers, and for the, I guess, basically they put them on trial for treason, for what have you, different. They accused them of different crimes or whatever, and basically the Shah of Iran, I don't know the exact number, I don't want to say thousands, I don't want to say hundreds, but quite a few of the officers of the army who had been basically become or joined the Bolshevik party, or what they call in Farsi Tudeh, Hezb Tudeh, Hezb, which means party, and Tudeh means public. Basically, the Communist Party, they had joined him. He executed all of them. Quite a few officers, they were executed by the Shah of Iran, not Reza Shah, Mohammad Reza Shah. At any case, he took the full power, and for all practical reasons, the ban of the publications again went into effect, and the books were censored after that, and the central government became stronger and stronger. And this is the difference after 1940, basically 1945, because the U.S. had won, the war. If it wasn't for the U.S., the Europeans, England would have never been able to defeat Germans. That's a fact. That's a fact that the U.S. helped Europe, especially England, especially France, during the First World War and the Second World War. The difference was, in First World War, the Germans didn't go to Paris. There was a stalemate, and millions were killed. But the Second World War, Hitler actually went to Paris on one trip and made his enemies sign the peace treaty or whatever have you. At any case, the major difference is that after 1945, the United States took the position of what England had before. So England before was basically taking the Iranian oil and giving a very, very small percentage back to the public. And Masjid Suleiman, which is a location near the Iraqi border, and I think is in the southwest of Iran, that was the first place in the Middle East that oil had been discovered, I assume by the British, and they took it for years and years till 1945, and maybe even after that. But the interesting thing is that as far as geopolitically, the US replaced England, and this is really a pivotal point in the history, not only in the history of Iran, in the history of the world, because America at the time was victorious and basically the only superpower in the world with the nuclear bomb. Of course, that changed after that, and it doesn't relate so much to Iran. If it doesn't relate so much to Iran, it doesn't pertain to Iran, I may not discuss it here. Anyway, this went on, and then as Mohammad Reza Shah got stronger and stronger, he felt more secure. He basically had the U.S. backing him up against his enemies, against whether they were local folks in Iran or the foreign enemies or whatever. He had the U.S. to fall back on, and he became basically a dictator. And then I just want to jump from there to the to the expulsion of Ayatollah Khomeini, and talk about Khomeini a little bit. And I think in 1962, 1963, the Iranian government, there was some turmoil and commotion among the clergymen, and the Shah of Iran sent some troops to basically quiet everything down. And in the skirmishes, they basically killed, I don't know how many, but some of these clergymen were killed. How it started was very, very interesting, because Khomeini started becoming the focus of this uprising. And in Tehran, I think in 1963, around the square, I think they call it Jaleh, they claimed that a few thousand people had got killed. Of course, back then, Mohammad Reza Shah sent the troops and even the tanks into the streets of Tehran to basically get the full control of the capital city. The problem with Khomeini and the Shah was rather complicated, and at any case, Khomeini at the time was not a high-ranking Ayatollah, and I think it's safe to assume that he was a mid-level clergyman. And but because he stood against the Shah at the time, against his policies, against his dictatorship, he stood out. He stood out, and the story goes that the Shah of Iran wanted to execute Khomeini, and the close clergyman to the Shah, the official clergyman of Iran at the time, Ayatollah Shariat Madari, I think he mediated, and he says, Your Excellency, you should not do this. He's a clergyman, so and so. Anyway, he had, the Shah of Iran changed his decision, and he sent Khomeini into exile. And I'm not quite sure if he went to Turkey first or Iraq first, but he was in exile for many years. But he never stopped his publications, his declarations. His messages were all basically published and distributed secretly in Tehran. Now, after this, we know that he came back to Iran in 1979, and they call that the revolution. But we will talk about it a little bit later. But I want to talk about a little bit about the creation of SAVAK and their training by CIA, and the Iranian government purchasing the basically American equipment, some of them good, like F-14, but a lot of them were basically used and basically useless against the enemies. But they were effective, effective for the people of Iran. Against the people of Iran, he did use the troops in many times. Anyway, and I hope you find this useful. I have to cut this short because this period is rather long, and many things happened, including execution of many members of Mujahideen, many members of the opposition, and we will get to it as much as we can. But this is basically, in a nutshell, Mohammad Reza Shah came to power, the allies put him in the position. After that, he got stronger and stronger. Then we had the Khomeini's uprising and his subsequent exile into another country till 1979 when he came back to Iran. And we're going to, basically, I'm going to go over it a little bit in the second segment of this audio. I hope you find this information useful, and it will be continued. Thank you.